told her mother and father, and she wrote me a letter. And her brother was a good friend of mine on the California, and he got killed. Yeah. Uh-huh. And they invited us to come up, and I talked to Jennifer Eve, and she and a camera woman that time went up there in El Reno, and we sat and talked and had lunch and went out to the graveyard where after several years they buried him in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And then after several years, I think she said 12 years, they brought him back and buried him in El Reno.
Sir, what's your full name?
Luther Douglas Worley.
Okay, this is February
16th.
1989.
Yeah.
My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Luther Douglas Worley in Norman, Oklahoma. So, where were you born?
I was born in Medicine Mound, Texas.
And when's your birthday?
August 2nd,
What year?
1918.
1918. Okay. And who is your father?
Jeff Worley.
Jeff Worley. And your mother?
Sally Ernest.
Ernest. E-R-N-E-S-T.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When did you join the Navy?
I joined the Marine Corps in July of 1940.
Why the Marine Corps?
Oh, I wanted to go in the military service, and the publicity of the Marine Corps and what I had heard about it, I liked it real well.
Mm-hmm. And where'd you go for boot camp?
San Diego.
San Diego.
And after boot camp, I went to sea school because I was selected to go aboard ship and be in the Marine Guard. We were in sea school 2 or 3 weeks, and then we caught a ship, the old Saratoga, that took recruits and sailors and Marines to Pearl Harbor, and I went aboard the California there.
And when did you go aboard the California?
Oh dear, let's see. It was about late July when I know 6 weeks. That would be August, September, probably late September or early October of 1940.
1940. What were your duties on the California?
A Marine Guard. My first duties on the California was a mess cook for the NCOs. We went through the galley and got the food and set up the tables and put the food on the table, and the NCOs ate, and we cleaned up, but took the dishes back down to the galley, and I did that for about 3 months.
Where were your quarters on California?
My quarters was in what we called a casemate. It was just one of the partition rooms on the ship. I was in casemate 4.
And what deck is that located on?
It's I don't remember what they called the deck, but it was the deck above the main deck. I think it was the boat deck.
Is that where they have the 5-inch guns? The
Yes,
casemates?
yes. I was a member of the 5-inch gun crew.
What did you do on the crew of the 5-inch guns? What was your particular
I was
duty?
a trayman. You know anything about that?
What does a trayman do?
Well, the way the 5-inch gun works, it has the big opening out at the butt of the gun, and when we load the shell in, I would put the tray in, and they'd load the shell, and I'd drop the tray out, and they'd close the I've forgotten what they call that, but they closed the gun at the butt end, and then they would fire. And as it recoiled, I'd have to stand down like this and straight up. And as it recoiled, and they'd open the gun and remove the hull that was shot, I'd put that tray in, and they'd put another shell in, and then closed it.
Yeah.
It kept from scratching up the threads inside the gun.
Okay. What were some of the cruises that California went on?
Well, the only thing that we did from the time I went on, except for one exception, we just cruised out in the ocean and had target practice. We had a small ship that pulled a target, and we would practice firing.
What were the big guns in the California?
16-inch.
Did you have the airplanes in the California?
Well, we had, I believe it was two.
Two.
Yeah, those little seaplanes.
Were you aware of the Japanese buildup in the Pacific?
No. Of course, I was amazed, that I was in the Marines and aboard ship, and it was so huge and so big and so many people, and all I did after I got through mess cooking was to stand guard. I stood guard at where they locked the people up down below, in the brig, and then I was standing guard at the aft part of the ship, the main deck back there, and I stood guard some where the officers come aboard on the opposite side of the ship where the enlisted come aboard.
Who was a captain on the California?
Captain Bemis.
Did you ever work with his orderly or?
Well, I was going to be an orderly for him, but instead they made me a communication orderly. And I carried the messages around to the officers down in the officers' country. They called it officers' country, and let them read the message and sign.
What was your station during general quarters?
Where I lived.
Okay.
Same place, in casemate 4.
What did you do December 6th?
December 6th, I think I was on guard duty, if I remember. I hadn't thought about that.
And that was Saturday?
Yeah.
And did you have liberty that night?
No. I was going on liberty that Sunday, the 7th.
So tell me, begin with when you first got up Sunday morning, what happened December 7th?
Well, it was just like every other Sunday to begin with. And we had our chow, and I bathed and shaved and got ready. I was going ashore that Sunday. They call it going on liberty. And I was ready to go, except I was reaching in my locker for my cap. I heard somebody in the casemate say, well, they're playing war again. They had played war and dropped sandbags in some of the airplanes, I guess, for training. They're playing war again, and I started over there to look out the gun port. We had a big port where the barrel worked back and forth. Right over, we could look right over at Hickam Field. And about that time, somebody said, playing war, hell, the Japanese are attacking. And all of a sudden, everybody knew it was the Japanese. I don't know why or how. I didn't know, but I had no idea. But then it started. They just bombed Hickam Field, and all the airplanes were going up, people were blowing up, and then another wave of planes came in that were carrying torpedoes. And we saw from our side of the ship, and the planes come over that way, we could see the Japanese pilots just as plain as I see you, and they were grinning and letting their torpedoes go, and the machine gun bullets were hitting the water and then coming over the ship. And 2 of the torpedoes exploded. I guess that's all we got on one side, our side. And it didn't seem to bother the ship too much. But a little later on, we got a bomb on the other side of the ship, and I thought the world would come to an end then. It exploded. It went 3 decks down and exploded. And I just froze for a moment and closed my eyes, and the fire was licking me in the face. And we had watertight doors, and nothing's supposed to come in those watertight doors when they're closed at general quarters. But the fire came through. all the way across the casemate from the other side of the ship over to where we were. And of course I went over to the port to get some fresh air. I just got my hair singed and my eyebrows, and that's all. But it tore up the ship below.
How close were you to the bomb?
Well, where it went down, I was about, I'd say, 10 or 15 feet where it went down.
How much damage that bomb did?
Oh, it just tore the ship all to pieces. And it killed all the people that were down in there, just about all of them that were down in below there. Two of the Marines went down below to help people get out, and they didn't come back.
Any idea how many were killed from that bomb?
No, not a count.
So the California took two torpedoes and one bomb.
Yeah.
Did the California settle to the bottom?
It settled to the bottom, and it was listing a little over towards Hickam Field, about so. Yeah, it sat down on the bottom.
And how deep is that bottom?
Well,
Any idea?
for example, it may not have been as deep as this, but I told you I saw the Oklahoma roll over.
Yeah.
Well, and those are big ships. Have you ever seen a battleship? Well, the Oklahoma rolled over, and all you could see was just a little bit of that bubble that keeps the ship straight or level. There's a big bubble on all the way on each side of the ship. Just barely could just see just a little bit of that bubble out of the water.
Did you see the Oklahoma take the torpedoes?
No, I didn't see him take the torpedoes, but I saw it when it started coming over.
What did that look like when it was capsizing?
Well, it's unbelievable. I wouldn't believe that a ship would do that.
Any idea why it capsized?
Why?
Yeah.
It took so many torpedoes on that side. I've read articles that says it either took 7 or 8 or 9 torpedoes. But they just blew a hole in the whole side of the ship.
Now, what did that look like when it rolled over? Just describe what you saw.
Well, when I first saw it, and everybody was saying that we could hear that they got the Oklahoma, and we saw it coming over. We didn't say much of anything. It was just unbelievable that a big ship like that would just roll over and settle in the bottom.
Was it a fast roll or a slow roll?
No, slow. And a few minutes after it rolled over, I don't know how long, I couldn't tell now, we heard banging. Some of the guys that were in there were banging on the outside hull of the ship. And when they honored the Oklahoma up there that day in Oklahoma City, they said they saved 35 people out of there, cutting with a cutting torch. We watched them go over there with a cutting torch and cut holes in the ship.
And what were you doing? Did you fire any shots at the Japanese when
No,
they were attacking?
No. We couldn't because our gun would point right out into Honolulu, and of course we couldn't get the ammunition from below either after that bomb went off. After everything was, the airplanes did their job and they were gone. In our casemate, we had several people that came up from below. One of the Marines was in the brig down below, and I think it was 7 decks down. He was trying to get a bad conduct discharge. His name was Murphy. And when that torpedo came in there, it came in right where the brig was. And I'm surprised it didn't kill him, but it didn't. And he came up those 7 flights of stairs and was banging on the door to get into our casemate, and he had a sailor under each arm. He brought those two people up those stairs and brought them into our casemate. And I think this was the one that I was going to tell you about. One of the guys that came into our casemate had his leg broken in two places. Bones were sticking out. And it looked like his other hip was blown out of socket or something. And after the planes left, another guy and I got something, I don't remember what it was, and wrapped him in it. And got some kind of a board and put him on it. And we took him down those big ropes, the big lines they call them in the Navy. We took him down to the landing where the officers usually come up in their gigs and their small boats, and then we got on a motor launch and took him over to Fort Island, which was just a short distance, and took him to the sick bay over there. And he was in bad shape, but I think he probably would have made it. His worst problem was his leg was just crushed, and bones were sticking out. Then I went back aboard the ship to see if I could do anything. And first of all, they told us to go get all of our clothes, every bit of our clothes, but just leave what we had on and maybe a uniform to wear. And we took them over to Fort Island to a place designated, and they piled all the clothes there for people that didn't have clothes. And then I went back aboard the ship to see if I could help anyone. And I saw a Navy ensign lying right up at the top of a ladder. Now, he'd made it up that far, but he was out. And I started to see if I could pull him a little bit to see if he was alive or dead or what. And then the skin started pulling off of his wrist. So I didn't know what to do, and about that time, three guys behind me said, "We'll take care of it." They were medics, and they were going through the ship. And then two or three guys said that they were going to go up in the crow's nest. You know what that is?
That's on top of the
Superstructure, yeah. And it was the aft one. Said they were going up there, and I never had been up there. I don't know why. I went up there with them and spent the night. And during the night, it was real foggy and smoky and everything, burning. And I don't know whether it was true or not, but I was told that we shot down 3 of our own planes. Everybody was shooting. And the sky was full of tracer bullets. And after that, since I was on the staff, the captain's staff, we moved over to the submarine base. Have you ever been to Pearl Harbor?
No, never had.
Well, across the harbor was the submarine base. And we moved over, the admiral, they had an Admiral Pye on the ship. He and the captain and the officers moved over to the submarine base across the harbor. And we were standing guard. The Marines, they scattered the Marines out to stand guard. I was standing guard around Admiral Kimmel's house. And his aides, he lived across the street. We stood guard at his house too. We did that for quite a while. And about the time the new admiral came over to take over from Admiral Kimmel, I've forgotten his name. Well, we were, I don't know why, but my group of guards, we moved out near Waikiki Beach. There's a Navy officers' housing out there. And we were standing guard around that because the women and children were scared to death, and they were living out there, and it was wooded, and the water was rolling in all the time, hitting the rocks, and it was real scary, real spooky. But we stood guard out there, and some of the women would move out of their house and let us sleep in there, and they'd go sleep with a neighbor, so we'd have a place to sleep. And we did that for quite a while. And seeming like it was March of 1942, we got on the ship with all the staff and went to San Francisco, and I went aboard the USS Pennsylvania. And it was in Pearl Harbor in dry dock.
Yeah.
And it got some damage, but I don't think it was too serious. And I stayed on the ship 3 or 4 months in Pennsylvania. We'd go out and train a little and come back in every now and then. And I asked to put in a request to get off the ship early. I got off the ship about 5 months early. I should have been on there for 2 years to go to metalsmith school. Because I had done some welding and repair work, and they granted it. And I got off the ship and went down to San Diego to a holding organization for 2 or 3 months, and then went to Alameda and started metalsmith school. It was a 6-month school. I was a PFC then, in charge of 52 men going through the school. And we were 3 months in Alameda, and they picked up all the equipment and all the men and everything and sent us to Norman, Oklahoma.
Oh.
And started South Base.
Yeah.
You know, you're familiar with South Base. We were the first group of Marines that landed here and went out to South Base. And it was raining, and that red mud was just yuck.
Well, what'd you do at South Base?
We went to finished our metalsmith school, and that's about all we did. Of course, when we first got here, we moved into a new built barracks, and I had them. You know what field day is?
No.
That's cleaning up. We had a field day just about every day after school for about 3 weeks because this red fine sand was in there. We had to get all cleaned up. We had to stand inspections, and we had to march to the chow hall, which was right across. I'd follow them out by the barracks and march them to the chow hall just across the street, but that's what we were supposed to do. We couldn't walk over there. But they walked back, and then I'd follow them in and march them about 5 or 6 or 8 blocks to where we were doing our metal work. And I stayed here in Norman until about the middle of December. And they sent me to El Centro, California. They assigned me to a dive bomber squadron. And we went out there, and we were getting planes ready. And we stayed there until about March of 43. Then we went overseas. We went to the Marine base in Hawaii. And they got us scared that the Japs were going to come back and try to take Midway, so they sent us to Midway. And we stayed out there for several months. That's nothing but a pile of sand out in the ocean.
On Midway?
Yeah. I mean, nothing. There's just a few trees there, and millions of birds, and they squawk and squeal and fight all day, all night. You ever hear of a goonie bird?
Yeah.
They are goonie. I tell you, there's a bunch of those. I can understand why they're goonie, because they lay their eggs right out in the hot sun, and the little birds are hatched right out in the hot sun, and they don't have any protection whatsoever. And they don't get, the mother doesn't hardly stay around to shade them. We stayed out there a few months, and then we started our moving down. We went down to Guadalcanal, and it was just about all over by the time we got there, but our bombers were going out and bombing. And we had 5 men. I was one of 5 that was working in a metal shop. And they'd go out and bomb during the day and come back in the evening, and we'd patch them up, and they'd go out the next day.
So your main duty was repairing airplanes?
Repairing airplanes.
Yes. What What was your particular job in repairing the airplane? What'd you do?
I just did anything and everything, we had to patch up the holes, file it and cut it down and cut the old metal out and put a patch on it and rivet it. We just kept the airplanes patched up so that they would be flyable. And we moved down, just kept moving down south to, we went down to, I think of it now. I can't think of the name of the island we went to from there. But we went on down to Espiritu Santos and on out to Bougainville in the Pacific. And we got, there were still some Japs on Bougainville, and they were throwing some ammunition at us and trying to blow things up. And everywhere we moved to, we had to dig a foxhole. And another place we were at Munda. And one time in Munda, we were 5 or 6 of us lived together all the time in a tent. And we put up a tent right by where a big bomb crater was. And we used that bomb crater. We built with wood a platform and on each side to hold it up, and at the back. And then we got a barrel and put a spout on it. And we had us a shower. We just fixed a place to walk down in there and go down there, and the sun would heat the water almost too hot. We'd take a shower with that thing, and that place was covered with crabs, those big red crabs. We got boards to put our cots on. We'd put our shoes on the boards, and those crabs would get in our shoes at night. So we learned to look down in that shoe before we tried to put it on. That at first we really got a kick out of it, because you look down in that shoe and that crab is just looking right at you. Big red things and those bug eyes. And the vehicles running around, the military vehicles, would just squash them, and they'd stink, and it was bad. And as much as we could, we ate with the Seabees. The Seabees were out there building their airfield, airstrips, and patching them up. They really had good food. But there got to be more Marines than there were Seabees, so they said we couldn't eat with them anymore. But we went on to Bougainville, then we turned around and came back and took a little rest period down in a place called Ifadi. It's a French island. And we had some delicious food, bacon and eggs and all kinds of good food to eat. We stayed there a little while. Then we came back to the States, and I got back to the States in October of 1944. I was a tech sergeant at the time, and they assigned me to Marietta, Georgia. And they had a big place there where they repaired airplanes and stuff.
Now, were these Navy airplanes you were working on?
Yes. Yes.
Where were you in VJ Day?
When was that?
That was August.
When the war is over?
Yeah.
I was at Cherry Point, North Carolina.
Did you celebrate VJ Day?
Oh yes, a little bit, but not much. We didn't have much of a base there. It was a small base. We didn't go to the club too much then. Our first daughter was born there, and that's where I left the service from, in Cherry Point.
What's your fondest memory of the California?
Well, probably the the people I associated with, and of course, learning to live aboard ship, and they have rules on top of rules on top of rules of the way you have to. For instance, they they work us to death to keep the ship clean,
Yeah.
and we had to swab the decks and swab the decks and swab the decks. And one rule that you didn't break was you don't go across a wet deck. And that was a lot of things that we just learned how to live aboard ship and how to stand guard and how to protect ourselves and try to get promotions. And the 2 years, hope the 2 years would go fast and we'd get off. I didn't mention one time during our tour we went to Bremerton, Washington, and was in dry dock. We were up there 3 or 4 months, and we got back to Pearl Harbor just a few months before they struck.
Anything else about the Oklahoma that you can recall when you saw it roll over?
Not really. I just felt so sick in my stomach that I just can't explain it. That was the most fantastic thing I think I've ever seen in my life, and I couldn't believe that ship would just almost go out of sight.
Yeah,
Huh?
Yeah, okay. Sir, I want to thank you.
Thank you for coming by, and I'm glad to visit with you.
Yes, sir.